You're listening to the StudioPTBO podcast, where we talk all things marketing to help you build and grow your business online. Welcome to the latest episode. Welcome to the StudioPTBO podcast. We are back, and we're back at it again with another guest. It's a rainy day here in Peterborough, Ontario, but we get to talk about marketing and mindset knowledge to help you build and grow and scale your business online. So it's a good day, even though it's raining. Neil Morden, how you doing? Things are going well? Life is good?
Excellent, man. Yeah. It's the clouds are here, but the sun is always coming around the next corner, right? That's the way we 100%. Look at life. We're rose-colored glasses, and there ain't nothing wrong with that. And our guest today has that outlook on life. Old friend of mine from my Toronto media days, Sonya Davidson. Welcome to the show, Sonya.
Hey, how are you guys?
Really good. And we're grateful you're on today. And, you know, I guess for starters, you could maybe give some context about, you know, what your role was back in the traditional media days, if you will. You and I worked together on various magazines, but you were more at a macro level in terms of looking after PR and communications and all that kind of stuff, advertorials that clients would book, which is now in the modern day era called sponsor content. It's just another way of, but walk us through like what your role was in those traditional media days, and then we can sort of pivot to then how you got out of that world. And it wasn't intentional why you got out of it, but just let's start there.
Right. So when I started in the magazine industry, that was the fun days. I think, the company that we were with, Multivision Publishing, which turned into St. Joseph's Publishing, we had a lot of great magazines under our roster. We had Toronto Life, which is the most recent, but when we were there was Elm Street, Saturday Night, Shift magazines. They were all incredible publications, and my role within the company was to kind of be that kind of in-between person with advertising, Salesforce, and the editorial side. So my role in the company was to help kind of with clients who were interested in purchasing, advertising pages. Like, who hears about that anymore?
It's so old school.
Yeah, so old school. And the clients would come back and say, okay, so what else can you do for us? Or is there anything that, kind of what we call added value then? And so the sales force would come to me and with the art director, and we would kind of brainstorm and come up with some ideas that would suit the various clientele that the magazines would go to. And it really ranged. If we think back about it, I think at one point we maybe had 7 magazines at one point, where I had to pivot from cosmetics to wine to cars to technology. So it was, for me, it was amazing because I did get to learn a lot. And I mean, we were working with some of the finest, including you, Neil,
thank
but
you.
also, Stevie Cameron, David Livingston, Kevin Sue, Rhonda Rich, like these incredible people, Charmaine Gooden, that were all amazing people in their genres and in their beat type of thing. So I think, that was fun. And then things started to change. I mean, I ended up, obviously, had kids, and that amazing lifestyle. I mean, to me, that was the best job. And then I had kids, and then, that kind of work lifestyle didn't work. How, the art directors would come in and, at 11 o'clock, and they'd work till midnight. And of course, I was the type of person who had to stay and make sure, that everyone was taken care of and that the jobs were done type of thing. So so the hours didn't quite work. I left, had kids. Then 9/11 happened, and that was an interesting pivotal point in my life. I had returned back after 6 months maternity leave back then, back to the magazine industry, and then realized I couldn't, as much as everyone says you can do everything, I knew physically I couldn't do everything right the way I wanted, having to balance that, finding that balance. We all wanted to find that balance of work and, family life type of stuff. So I left, and then an opportunity came up somebody suggested that I get into the blogging world. And I knew nothing about blogging when I walked into that
Yeah,
role.
you were a real early adopter.
Really,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's been like 10 years ago, if not more, when I entered into that blogging world, and I had to learn quickly. And the blogging world back then was, I called it the Wild Wild West, because it was, it was relatively new here in Canada. And I joined a site called Urban Moms, which, was a mommy blogging site.
Mhm.
But wow, was it crazy, back then. It was, there wasn't as many as there are now, obviously, but that mommy blogging
Mhm.
sphere really took off, obviously, with a
Mhm.
lot of the moms that were always doing the research online and that kind of stuff. And then I evolved and continued with that company for a while, and then started branching out more locally with Toronto Guardian. And then, which was something that I loved, because I also love arts and culture and food. And I felt that that really spoke to me personally. So that was kind of like, how I got
Yeah.
into this entire field. So,
Oh, sorry. I thought Cody was going to go.
Yeah.
So in terms of pivoting then, like Cody and I always talk to entrepreneurs, and you have that mindset too about pivoting. And I know it was partially life stage, Sonya, with you, but I feel like you always sort of have a lens on the zeitgeist, what's happening, where things are moving. Is that true? And if so, does that excite you about, in terms of you always, confronting new life stages in terms of business ventures and whatnot? Is that just your ethos towards life? Why not try new things?
yeah, I think, it's kind of a more of a personal challenge, I think. When these opportunities come up, and it might not be something I'm 100% comfortable with, but I find that I surprise myself if I take that chance. And I think that, I might not necessarily always feel like I'm the best person for it, but I think we all kind of feel that way. We kind of
Mhm.
have that, mentality. And I speak to a lot of people in a various roles of what they do, from actors to, singers to teachers, to TV personalities, that a lot of people say, I feel like I'm an imposter in what I do. And
Mm.
it's kind of mind-blowing for me to hear that from some of the people who, I think have it all together, type of thing. So, I think, I think personal challenge is something that, we got to step outside our comfort zone a little bit,
Yeah.
and just kind of, what's the worst thing that can happen? I think that was kind of the way I was raised, was, you prepare for the worst in your mind. What's the worst thing that could happen? Is it really that bad? What we do,
Yeah.
it's, you take a chance. And I think that's the thing that kind of forward, cautiously, of course, but I think, I surprise myself a lot. So,
Me and Neil have chatted quite a bit, because like Neil talks about his time in media quite a bit. We've had some really great conversations about, the magazine industry, and, kind of how Neil has learned publishing. And I'm just really curious, like, what was the transition like now? And are you still pushing even some people towards like a magazine? Like, how do you identify what the better advertising buy, or what would you recommend for, because you've worked in both like media, and maybe Neil, you could chime in as well. Like there's so many different types of media buys, especially for sponsored content. What would you recommend for an entrepreneur? Like, should they be in magazine? Should they, look at, social influencers? Should they look at buying, a digital, buy? Like, how do you map that out currently, where within your role, and like what recommendations would you have for an entrepreneur, for a business owner, so we can kind of, I guess tie this back into, who we're looking to help as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and what I would do here, Sonya, it's a great question, Cody. I love it. And contextualize it, Sonya, by giving the backstory about, so the PR, used to do PR for us, earned media in Toronto, trying to get us on print, TV, radio, traditional. So sort of cover that. And then now you've got this whole other universe where you can buy or create earned media. So what does it look like? It's intimidating, isn't it?
It is, and it's questions that come up often with me. I do get invited into PR agencies and marketing agencies to give kind of that perspective on this side, and I know because I have the experience on both sides. It's an interesting insight. I get what media needs to do. We all have a job to do, put it that way. I mean, at the end of the day, again, because I worked on a lot of advertorials, I know the brands come to influencers to get their messages out. That's plain and simple. What's different now, and what is very important, we're all drawn to online now, like from kids and the generations after us, our kids, their kids, well, who knows about their kids, but our kids are all, they watch YouTube. They don't watch TV anymore, and they don't read magazines. And you think about, when was the last time you picked up a print anything? It's rare, right? And so now with your question about where do you do your media buys? I've been telling marketers, you need to set aside a budget if you want to work with influencers. And influencers, the beauty of dealing with this realm is that it's a lot faster. If you think about the production time with magazines, and we worked 3, 4, 5 months in advance with magazines. Now, obviously, with online, some of these influencers, and myself included, like if someone says to me, I need a story up within 48 hours and I'm willing to pay for it, yeah, I'm going to jump at that, of course, right? So it's I think people have to find a balance, and when they look at influencers, they need to look at who their demographic is, and who their demographic is following, not the numbers per se, because there's a lot of influencers, of course, who are younger, lifestyle, they do beautiful work. There's no doubt about it, but they speak to a different audience. If you're coming to me with, say, for example, skincare for anti-aging, so it's a very different market from the younger influencers, and
and it's micro influencer too, right? You're a big fan of micro influencers, not the macro with the millions, because it can't necessarily personalize it as much, right? It can be, yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest struggle now between people I know who are still in traditional media and influencers. There's kind of this divide. And hopefully that is going to go away once we all recover from this COVID and realize we're kind of in the same world, and we need to respect each other for what we do. But that divide has been very interesting. The past few years, being invited to, say, media events or PR events, there was always one event for traditional media and then another event for influencers.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I was like, so for me, it was
makes no sense. Yeah.
I think it's because traditional media is I have to say, highly regarded still, and considered earned media, whereas influencers now are considered paid media.
Okay.
So, and the approach is very different also within the events. So it's interesting for me to see both sides, because sometimes I get invited to one or the other or both, because they just kind of don't know where to place me, because a lot of them still know me from traditional media side of things. But it is a realm that is constantly changing, for sure.
Yeah. So how would you recommend a business owner, an entrepreneur that is looking to either, like, how do they approach a influencer and like feel like they're not getting ripped off from the influencer and the price point? And then, like, maybe you can walk through that. Like, what's your process that way? And then what's the process of earned media? Because it's something that me and Neil have been chatting about quite a bit. Like, we don't know, like, Neil has more of a background in earned media than I do. But I'm curious, like, how would an entrepreneur go about, doing both earned media, but then like with social influencers? Like, what are the steps? Give us some tactical advice on how an entrepreneur can really do this well.
I think in terms of traditional PR, we look at that and say, so how is that measured? a lot of times when you talk about traditional PR, it's hard to measure that. I mean, you get the coverage, say you get the coverage in Toronto Star and things like that. The expectations are very different from what marketers and entrepreneurs are expecting from influencers because of, I think, our, current mindset on society and how we use social media. There's this presumption that everything is instant, including social media, including dealing with influencers. So we see a lot of, people saying, or brands that say, oh, well, I didn't get my, rate of investment from an influencer that had, 20, 30, 50K following, and I don't understand why I just paid them X thousands of dollars. It's, I think, the marketers still have to look at, even though they paid for it, they still have to realize, there might not be that return on investment right away. They do have to, I think, really, again, understand who their demographics are. And, you could be a luxury car owner and you go, or a luxury car brand and go to influencers, but you got to step back and think, okay, well, that influencer's 20. Are they going to really go and buy an Audi?
Yeah.
Probably not. So
You have to be authentic and realistic, about that expectation.
We talk a lot about authenticity and transparency, in the world of blogging. So it's important that, I've dealt with, even earlier on, I've dealt with big brands, like major international brands that say, we love your voice. But here is everything, and they present me with a deck that's like 100 pages, and say, we're willing to pay for your voice, but you got to stick to these messages. And that was at the beginning a real struggle, for what we do. And as I say, like, I kind of bridged that with magazines, with what I did in the magazine world, over 20 years ago. I was doing exactly what I'm doing now, just in a different medium. So it's just very different now. And
Sonya, like, take us, like, I want to be a fly on the wall here because you've worked with like big brands. Like, take us into a boardroom, like an average boardroom. What are their expectations of you? Like, what do you hear? Because to me, that would be like pretty abstract concept to them still. Like influencers, they'd be like, we want this influencer, but we want immediate, ROI. And how do you sort of manage expectations in that regard?
A lot of times it's interesting because a lot of the brands don't really know what they want to do in terms of what they want to do with social media, or what they want to do with social influencers, I should say. They heavily do rely on the influencers to come up with the concepts. I think, that's part of what they're paying for is, a brand will come to me and say, so right now, to be completely honest, cannabis companies are going crazy, right? Trying to, get ready to get out there and get, their messaging out there, and there's money there to be had. So they tend to come to us and say, your audience best. So tell us, give us some ideas, flesh out some ideas that they can, that we can execute, and hope that works. And I would say, majority of the time what we do, I run a site called Auburn Lane with a few other established writers that are catered to women 35 plus. We know that market because we're in that market, and we know what that market wants to hear, what they want to learn. So the brands have to trust us and to deliver what they want to see. And I have to believe that it's been successful because they do come back. So that's the telltale sign, is when they return again and again and again, going, okay, now what else? What else can we do? Okay. They're excited, and I think that's, one of the things that a lot of influencers has to take a look at is, will these brands come back to you? Then you're doing a good job, because it's hard to tell sometimes. Like, we come up with campaigns for them, which if you went to traditional media or to an agency, advertising agency, which I also have experience in before magazines, they pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just to get those pitch ideas. Yeah. Now they're virtually getting them upfront for free. So it's, again, a totally different, realm altogether. And, that's part of the job now with working with brands.
TikTok, what's your lens on TikTok? So speaking of influence, like Instagram, I'm not saying Instagram's passe because there's obviously money to be had on Instagram.
Or yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So what's your take on TikTok? I'm very bullish on it right now. What's your read on it and where brands should be?
I love TikTok for entertainment value. It's like the beam of sunshine right now, with everything that we're all going through. I don't use TikTok myself because I'm like, I look at all those dance moves and I go, I don't know how to do that stuff, but it's quite entertaining. I think again, speaking with the demographics, I mean, our age group may be slower to jump on that bandwagon. And I think we're also a little bit more cautious, as opposed to the younger influencers who are, embrace it fully. So I'm at the kind of, do I jump on the bandwagon or not? And I don't know that if I'm too late, or also what do I have to say? I think I still have that mindset of, if I have nothing important to say, why am I on there? But it is so fun. I did start jumping onto Reels just to kind of play around with that because, okay, total confession, my dog has an Instagram account. So he's actually doing very well on Instagram. So I thought, okay, we'll try the Reels thing there. I thought I'd try TikTok, but now that Reels has been launched, I think I'm going that route right now.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, so Instagram Reels was recently launched, and they're replicating TikTok because obviously all the good social media brands, not blands, but blands too, copy each other.
Yeah.
Copy
well,
each
it's incredible too. Like, I don't know if you've seen Neil and Sonya yet, like with Instagram Reels, the organic reach is through the roof right now on using Instagram Reels. I know it's only 15 seconds.
I have noticed that. It doesn't build followers like TikTok, but the engagement's through the roof. I agree, but not followers because people don't want to follow people. For instance, Cody, want to follow the reels of people, but they can't do that like on TikTok. They have to follow the person, and they don't want to necessarily see what the person's doing in the stories in the feed, which is actually a good point. So
it'll be really interesting to see how Instagram, if they can nail this UI UX thing, I think that it'll give TikTok a run for its money. But I'm curious, Sonya, like, when it comes to these platforms, like what platforms are you generally working with? Like what platforms are you leaning towards when it comes to finding social influencers, and how are you finding them, and how are you matching them with like potential clients?
Well, I find, Instagram is still really big. I right now, on occasion do find matches. Like there are brands that come to me, or marketing agencies that say, okay, we don't know where to go. And you're kind of more tapped in because, I go to the events, I see the influencers that are at the events, and okay, quite honestly, I'm usually the oldest one in the room. So it's a neat perspective for me to step back and see, the people that are invited to these events. And then I follow up with, what kind of following they have, how authentic is the message, and just them as human beings, getting to know a lot of them at these events, and their seriousness about their businesses, which is, really nice to see, because a few years ago, it was kind of more of a hobby, and they didn't take it as seriously. It was just kind of like, oh, fun, and I get free stuff, and I get to go to parties, yay, But now it's like, okay, they've got mouths to feed, because a lot of them are now starting to have babies, right? So now they're going, okay, we can actually make a serious, career out of doing this. But they find they have to use all channels to keep up with, getting their messages out. And, some Instagram, I think, is still very big. People are very visual. We're all, prefer that kind of visual.
Glossy magazine still kind of plays into it a bit, right?
Yeah. I mean, I still buy travel magazines, I was traveling, and cooking magazines, everything too. But, it's neat.
Yeah. I want to finish up here with your Twitter account. So how people can follow you. And that's how I mean, know you beyond, other than we're Facebook friends, but on Twitter, I really like your Twitter vibe. And, you know, I would actually add to that that's what I would say you would do on TikTok, is start to, you know, do video versions of some of the tweets you put out. But your tweets are really about positivity, kindness, sharing your knowledge, subject expertise. But tell people about your approach to your Twitter account to finish up here, and where the name came from, the Culture Pearl.
Oh God. Well, thank you for noticing the Twitter, because a lot of times I go on Twitter and I wonder, who's seeing this stuff, right? But you can find
Neil. Neil is.
Cody's not bullish on Twitter, as you can. Yeah.
So I'm at the Culture Pearl. You can see that down there, I see. And that's also on Instagram. And I also write for other sites, Auburn Lane, Toronto Guardian, and Canadian Reviewer. So I'm contributing to other sites, and Tech Daily as well. So you can find me in a lot of places, put it that way.
And she's one of the nicest people you ever meet. And I'm really proud to call her a friend. And I learned a lot today from
me too.
This episode, Cody?
Yeah, 100%. Sonya, thank you so much for sharing with us today. It was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you, Neil, for another great episode of the StudioPTBO podcast. Best place, would you say the best place to reach you is the Culture Pearl, or would there be anywhere else you kind of want to direct people?
Yeah. Just reach me at the Culture Pearl. I'm Neil knows I am on social media all the time, or ask my husband. It's awesome.
and Cody, I should add, she's a valuable member of our StudioPTBO Marketing Hacks group.
Yep, 100%. And if you are a passionate, energetic entrepreneur that is looking to grow and scale your business on the online space, literally just search StudioPTBO Marketing Hacks and get yourself inside of there. There's probably 750 business owners inside of there that are just looking to grow and scale. If you're passionate, you're an energetic entrepreneur, make sure you get inside of there. Thank you, Sonya. Thank you, Neil. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the StudioPTBO podcast. We will see you soon.